Over 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece, a blind poet named Homer, along with the most famous writers, playwrights, and historians of his time, recorded the stories we now know as Greek mythology. These ancient tales were filled with mighty gods, heroic figures, and unfortunate mortals who often found themselves caught in the middle of the gods' powerful schemes. The roles of Zeus in Greek mythology. One of the most important figures in these stories is Zeus, the king of the gods. But what led Zeus to fight against his own father? And why did he send a great flood to wipe out humanity? These questions, along with many others, form the foundation of Greek mythology. The tales also explain how humans were created by the Titan Prometheus and how Pandora's box unleashed all the world's evils. We also learn about the souls of the dead, who journeyed to the underworld ruled by Hades, and how legendary heroes like Hercules and Odysseus managed to slay terrifying monsters like the Hydra, Cyclops, and Medusa. Creation myths. The story of Greek mythology begins with the origin of the world itself. At the start, there was only chaos, a vast, empty void. From this chaos, Gaia, the earth, and Eros, the spirit of love, emerged. Soon, they were joined by night and day, who ended the darkness with the never-ending cycle of dusk and dawn. Eventually, Tartarus, the deepest and most feared pit in the world, where the souls of the damned would be punished, also came into existence. But the creation story doesn't end there. Gaia, the earth, gave birth to another being, Uranus, the sky. Gaia and Uranus united and produced 12 children, 6 sons and 6 daughters, who became known as the Titans. Among these Titans was Oceanus, a mighty river that circled the entire world, and Hyperion, the sun, who rode his grand chariot across the sky, shining light down on earth. When night fell, Hyperion's daughter, Selene, the moon, would rise, casting her gentle light into the darkness. However, Uranus, the sky, was a harsh father. He imprisoned his children, the Titans, deep within the earth. Desperate to escape, the Titans turned to their mother Gaia for help. Gaia created an indestructible sickle and gave it to her youngest and strongest son, Cronus. Cronus waited patiently for the right moment. When Uranus next came to lie with Gaia, Cronus sprang out and with one swift motion cut off his father's genitals, which fell into the sea. From this, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was born, marking the beginning of a new era of gods. After defeating his father, Cronus became the ruler of the world. However, his reign was destined to be short-lived. Cronus and his sister Rhea had 6 children together, 3 sons and 3 daughters. These children would become the new gods. But Cronus, much like his father, was fearful of losing his power. He had been warned that one of his children was fated to overthrow him, so he swallowed each of them whole as they were born. Only one child escaped this terrible fate. Zeus, the youngest of his children, was saved by his mother, Rhea. To protect her son, Rhea hid Zeus on Mount Ida in Crete. To trick Cronus, she gave him a rock wrapped in baby clothes, which Cronus swallowed without realizing the deception. Zeus was raised in secret by his grandmother, Gaia, until he grew strong enough to challenge his father. When the time came, Zeus returned to face Cronus. He struck down his father and freed his siblings from Cronus' stomach. With his brothers and sisters now by his side, Zeus declared war against the Titans. This war would last for 10 long years, with the outcome uncertain. To turn the tide of the war, Zeus released powerful allies from deep within the earth, the 100-handed giants and the Cyclops. The Cyclops were master craftsmen who forged powerful weapons for the gods. They created a mighty thunderbolt for Zeus, a powerful trident for Poseidon, and a helmet of invisibility for Hades. Armed with these new weapons, Zeus and his allies were able to defeat the Titans, bringing about a new era where Zeus would reign as the king of the gods, ruling over both the heavens and the earth. After the Titans were vanquished, Zeus confined them to Tartarus, a deep abyss within the earth, where they would endure eternal suffering. Among the Titans, Atlas, who had led them in the battle, faced a unique fate. He was condemned to hold the sky on his shoulders for all time. Only a few Titans escaped punishment. Themis, the Titaness of law and order, and her son Prometheus, who had sided with Zeus from the beginning of the conflict, were pardoned and allowed to live among the gods. With the Titans no longer in power, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades divided the world among themselves. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld, where the souls of the dead would reside. Zeus and his fellow gods took up residence on Mount Olympus, becoming the 12 Olympians, who would rule over both mortals and monsters. Despite the gods now ruling the earth, Prometheus, one of the few spared Titans, was dissatisfied with its inhabitants. He saw only mindless beasts, creatures unworthy of attention. So Prometheus molded humans from clay, creating them in the image of the gods. However, he was not content with his new creation, as humans lived in caves like other animals. To elevate them, Prometheus gave them fire, a powerful flame that enabled them to create tools and rise from darkness. Humanity soon began to dominate all other creatures, but Zeus was displeased. He wanted humans to show gratitude to the gods, demanding that an animal sacrifice be made at each meal, and leaving it to Prometheus to decide which part of the animal would be offered. Loyal to humanity, Prometheus devised a plan to favor them. He slaughtered a bull and divided it into 2 portions, one with the choice meat hidden under the beast's unattractive stomach, and the other with bare bones concealed by a thick layer of delicious fat. Zeus chose the fat-covered parcel for the gods, but upon discovering only bones beneath, he became enraged. As punishment, Zeus took away the fire Prometheus had gifted to humans, plunging them back into darkness and forcing them to retreat to their caves. Determined to save his creation, Prometheus climbed Mount Olympus and stole the fire of the gods. With his great torch, he returned to Earth, rekindling fire for humanity and allowing civilization to rise once more. Furious at the sight of fire on Earth again, Zeus captured Prometheus and chained him to a mountain. Each day, Zeus sent an eagle to devour Prometheus's liver, and each night, as an immortal, Prometheus's liver would regenerate, only to be eaten again the following day. This torment continued for millennia, but Zeus was not finished. He sought to further punish humanity and commanded Hephaestus to create a being capable of bringing great suffering to mankind. Using clay from the earth, Hephaestus crafted the first woman. From Aphrodite, she received emotions and beauty. From Zeus, an insatiable curiosity. And from Hermes, the gift of speech and the name Pandora, meaning all gifts, as each god had bestowed a gift upon her. The gods also gave Pandora a final gift, a sealed box, which they warned her never to open. Zeus then instructed Hermes to deliver Pandora to Earth, where she eventually married Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Although Prometheus had warned his brother not to accept anything from the gods, Epimetheus was so captivated by Pandora's beauty that he accepted her without hesitation. For a time, they lived happily, exploring nature and raising their daughter Pyra, who brought them great joy. Yet, Pandora's mind constantly wandered back to the mysterious box, As time passed, her curiosity grew into an overwhelming urge. Unable to resist any longer, she finally peeked inside the box. The moment Pandora opened it, a great cloud filled the air, and all the evils that Prometheus had kept away from mankind were unleashed. Greed, envy, old age, and disease all escaped into the world. By the time Pandora managed to close the box, only one thing remained inside: hope. Zeus's ultimate punishment was to be the introduction of hope, ensuring that despite all adversity, men would cling to their lives, enduring the endless hardships that now weighed upon them. Thus, the Golden Age of Man, a time of perfection where humanity lived without worry, came to an end. In this era, people never aged, lived off the fruits of the land, and enjoyed nature's bounty. But with old age unleashed from Pandora's box, their time on Earth was over. The Age of Silver followed, and then the Age of Bronze, where men, becoming arrogant and neglecting to worship the gods, forged weapons to wage war on each other. Their cruelty and lust for war enraged Zeus, who concluded that humanity deserved total annihilation. The only solution he saw was to unleash a great flood. He called upon his brother Poseidon, who struck the ocean's depths with his trident, creating a wave so powerful it eclipsed the tallest mountains, engulfing the cities below. Torrential rains poured from the heavens, and fierce winds whipped the waters until they consumed everything in sight. Those who survived the initial onslaught soon succumbed to starvation, and eventually, all dry land vanished beneath the waters. Only 2 survivors remained: Pyrrha, daughter of Pandora, and Deucalion, son of Prometheus. Forewarned by Prometheus of the coming flood, they had built a ship to survive the cataclysm. Their small boat endured Poseidon's wrath, drifting alone on the vast oceans as they mourned the loss of their kin. Eventually, they drifted toward Mount Parnassus, the only peak that the floodwaters had not submerged.
Believing his task complete, Zeus commanded the rains to stop and the waters to recede, allowing the earth to become calm once more. However, the world was now devoid of human life. Deucalion and Pyrrha prayed to the gods for guidance on how to rebuild humanity. The Titan Themis answered their prayers, instructing them to walk along the mountain and throw stones behind their backs. Day after day, night after night, they did so, with Deucalion's stones transforming into men and Pyrrha's into women. Thus, humanity was reborn. With the sins of their ancestors washed away, they were given a second chance to forge their own path. Only time would reveal whether they would follow the same brutal and destructive path as their predecessors. But this time, humanity would be safeguarded. On Mount Parnassus, Deucalion discovered a gift, a tool so secure that even the gods of Olympus could not breach it, something that would protect humanity for all time. Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, reigned from his throne on Mount Olympus, with his symbols, the thunderbolt and the eagle, becoming powerful omens to humanity. Zeus controlled all aspects of the weather, from fierce thunderstorms to blinding blizzards, with these changes reflecting his mood. The Greeks revered Zeus as the greatest of the gods, granting good fortune to those who worshipped him and delivering harsh punishments to those who defied him. Once he had established his dominion over the world, Zeus sought a wife to rule alongside him. However, Zeus was notorious for his infidelity, marrying no less than 7 wives during his reign. Zeus' first marriage was to the nymph Medeia, the goddess of wisdom, who soon became pregnant with his child. However, Zeus had been forewarned by his grandparents, Gaia and Uranus, that Medeia was destined to bear him a son who would one day overthrow him. To prevent this prophecy from coming true, Zeus swallowed Medeia before she could give birth. Despite this drastic action, Zeus began to suffer from a severe headache, so intense that he asked for his head to be split open with an axe. From the wound sprang Medeia's child, a fully grown daughter named Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, who immediately took her place among the Olympians. Zeus' second wife was his aunt Themis, the titan of justice and law, who had betrayed her fellow titans to side with the gods during their war.
The union of Zeus and Themis produced 3 daughters, who would come to wield immense power over the mortal world. These daughters were known as the 3 Fates, the goddesses of destiny, who controlled the thread of life for every individual soul. The youngest sister, Clotho, the spinner, was responsible for spinning the thread of life at the moment of each human's birth, determining when a new soul would come into existence. Her older sister, Lachesis, the allotter, decided the fate of each person. With her measuring rod, Lachesis determined the length and nature of the thread spun by Clotho, mapping out the duration of each life and the major events within it. The eldest and most feared sister, Atropos, the unturning, held the final power. When a mortal's time on Earth was up, Atropos would use her great shears to cut the thread, ending their life. Zeus, despite being the father of many gods and goddesses through his various marriages, eventually chose his older sister Hera, the goddess of women and marriage, as his 7th and final wife. In Hera, Zeus found his queen, a partner to rule alongside him. However, even after marrying Hera, Zeus continued his pattern of infidelity, pursuing other women without restraint. His numerous affairs led to the birth of countless children, making him the progenitor of nearly every god and hero in Greek mythology. To win the hearts of the women he desired, Zeus often disguised himself in various forms. One of the women Zeus pursued was Europa, a princess from Tyre and the sister of the legendary hero Cadmus. One day, while Europa was gathering flowers by the coast, Zeus spotted her and became determined to make her his own. To conceal his unfaithfulness from Hera, Zeus transformed into a majestic white bull and descended to earth. Europa, captivated by the bull's beauty, climbed onto its back. As soon as she did, Zeus bolted toward the sea, carrying her with him. Frightened, Europa clung to the bull's horns as they crossed the vast ocean. To ease her fears, Zeus revealed his true identity, assuring her that he was not a mere animal, but the king of the gods. The two eventually arrived on Crete, the island where Zeus had been hidden as a child. There, Europa gave birth to several of Zeus's children, including Minos, who would become the king of Crete and the master of the legendary Minotaur. In honor of Europa, Zeus named the continent they stood upon Europe, and immortalized the white bull in the night sky as the constellation Taurus. Hera, Zeus's wife and the queen of the gods, was the revered guardian of marriage and women, holding a place of deep respect in Greek culture. However, she was also known for her vengeful and spiteful nature, which made her a challenging match for Zeus, whose endless affairs frequently incited her anger. Although she was his queen, Hera only bore Zeus 2 of the 12 Olympians, Ares and Hephaestus, while the other gods were the result of Zeus's many illicit liaisons. One of Zeus's most notorious betrayals involved the princess Io. When Hera became suspicious and began to investigate, Zeus, in an effort to protect Io, transformed her into a beautiful white cow. But Hera was not fooled by this ruse. Realizing she had caught Zeus in the act, Hera demanded that Zeus present her with the white cow as a gift. Zeus, knowing that refusal would confirm Hera's suspicions, had no choice but to comply. Hera then confined Io to a cave, placing her under the watchful eye of Argus, a fearsome creature with 100 eyes. Argus was the ideal guard, able to sleep with half his eyes closed while keeping vigilant watch with the other half, ensuring that Io could not escape. Zeus, too frightened of Hera to act directly, eventually sent the messenger god Hermes to rescue the tormented Io. Instead of relying on force, Hermes, known for his cleverness, chose to outsmart Argus, the creature guarding Io. He approached Argus as a friend, playing gentle melodies on his pipes and singing soothing lullabies until all of Argus's 100 eyes gradually closed. Once the final eye shut, Hermes swiftly drew his sword and killed the beast, freeing Io from her captivity. To honor Argus's loyalty, Hera placed his eyes in the tail of her favorite bird, the peacock, making it a symbol of her power. However, Hera's vengeance against Io was not yet satisfied. She sent a gadfly to relentlessly harass Io as she fled, nearly driving her to madness. Io wandered far and wide, and the sea along which she traveled would later be named the Ionian Sea in her honor. The Bosporus, meaning Ford of the Cow, also took its name from Io's journey. Eventually, Io reached the Nile in Egypt, far from Hera's grasp, where Zeus was finally able to restore her human form. Together, they had a child named Epiphus, and Io would become the ancestor of many of Greece's greatest heroes, including Perseus and Hercules. The trials of Leto and the birth of Apollo and Artemis. Leto, a lover of Zeus, faced the unrelenting wrath of Hera, who was consumed by jealousy upon discovering that Leto was pregnant with twins. To torment Leto, Hera unleashed the giant serpent Python, forcing her to flee across the length and breadth of Greece in search of a safe place to give birth. Hera's decree was clear. No city was to offer sanctuary to Leto. Desperate and exhausted, Leto wandered from Athens to Crete, from Lemnos to Samos, with no refuge in sight. It was only on the island of Delos that she found safety. But even then, Hera's cruelty persisted. Hera imprisoned Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, on Mount Olympus, preventing Leto from delivering her children. After 9 agonizing days and nights, the other goddesses, moved by Leto's plight, freed Eileithyia, allowing Leto to finally give birth to her twins, Apollo and Artemis. These children would grow to become powerful Olympian gods: Apollo, the god of archery and light, and Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Their birth was celebrated far and wide, with grand festivities held across the known world. However, Queen Niobe of Thebes, proud and arrogant, refused to join in. Boasting about her own 7 sons and 7 daughters, she claimed that she was more deserving of honor than Leto, who had only 2 children. Enraged by Niobe's insolence, Leto sent Apollo and Artemis to Thebes to exact retribution. Apollo struck down Niobe's sons, while Artemis ended the lives of her daughters, leaving Niobe to mourn alone. Overwhelmed with grief, Niobe fled to her homeland of Sipylus, where she wept endlessly, pleading with the gods to end her suffering. Zeus, in a rare act of mercy, transformed Niobe into stone, putting an end to her misery. Known as the Weeping Rock in western Turkey, Niobe's stone form is said to continue shedding tears whenever it rains, as water flows through the porous rock. Apollo and his quest for vengeance. Apollo, the younger of the twins, became the god of archery, light, and music. He was also closely associated with prophecy and eventually journeyed to Mount Parnassus, where the serpent Python, who had tormented his mother, had settled. Seeking vengeance, Apollo unleashed a barrage of arrows from his golden bow, slaying Python and establishing a grand temple where the serpent fell. This site would become the renowned Oracle of Delphi, where the Pythia, a powerful priestess, would deliver prophecies on behalf of Apollo. The Pythia, inhaling vapors from her chamber, would enter a trance-like state, delivering often wild and cryptic prophecies that guided countless people, from kings to commoners, throughout ancient Greece. After his triumph over Python, Apollo, filled with pride, declared himself the greatest archer of all time. His arrogance led him to mock Eros, the young god of love, for carrying a bow and arrows, which Apollo believed were too powerful for a mere child. Offended by Apollo's taunts, Eros vowed to teach him a lesson. He followed Apollo to the river Peneus, where the river god's daughter, the beautiful Daphne, sat by the shore. Eros, with deliberate precision, shot a gold-tipped arrow at Apollo, making him fall deeply in love with Daphne. But Eros also shot a lead-tipped arrow at Daphne, causing her to be filled with a strong aversion to Apollo. When Apollo, consumed with desire, approached Daphne, she fled in terror, running through the forest in a desperate attempt to escape him. Driven by Eros' spell and eager to declare his love, Apollo chased after her, quickly closing the distance with his divine speed. In her fear, Daphne called out to her father, the river god Peneus, begging for help. He responded, and Daphne soon felt her limbs grow heavy. Slowing to a halt, she began to transform. Her skin turned to bark, her hair became leaves, and she fully became the first laurel tree. In his sorrow, Apollo granted the tree eternal youth and immortality, ensuring that its leaves would remain evergreen and vibrant year-round. Mourning the loss of his love, Apollo kept a laurel wreath with him always, a symbol of his undying affection for Daphne. The legacy of Apollo and Artemis. Among Apollo's many offspring, his most significant child was Asclepius, a legendary physician whose skills were so extraordinary that he could even bring the dead back to life. This defiance of the natural order enraged Hades, as it deprived the underworld of souls. To restore balance, Zeus struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt. However, at Apollo's earnest plea, Zeus later resurrected Asclepius, who then became the god of healing and medicine. Asclepius would go on to father Hygeia, the goddess of cleanliness, whose name would give rise to the word hygiene. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister and the goddess of the hunt, was a masterful archer who protected hunters and ensured the balance of nature. As a goddess of the moon and one of the three virgin goddesses alongside Athena and Hestia, Artemis fiercely guarded her chastity. When Actaeon, a hunter and the grandson of Cadmus, accidentally stumbled upon her while she was bathing in the forest, Artemis swiftly punished him. She transformed Actaeon into a deer and set his 50 hunting dogs upon him, leading to his gruesome death. Poseidon's reign and revolt against Zeus. Poseidon, Zeus's brother, ruled the seas from his grand palace beneath the waves. Known as the Earth Shaker, Poseidon was responsible for creating earthquakes and traveling the oceans in his golden chariot, using his powerful trident to stir or calm the waters. One of Poseidon's harshest punishments was inflicted on Minos, the king of Crete. When Minos refused to sacrifice his finest bull to Poseidon, the god cursed Minos' wife to fall in love with the animal, resulting in the birth of the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature. Although Poseidon typically remained within his domain in the sea, he eventually grew tired of Zeus's rule on Olympus. Along with Athena, Hera, and Apollo, Poseidon attempted to overthrow Zeus. However, the rebellion failed, and Zeus punished Poseidon and Apollo by sending them to serve King Laomedon of Troy. There, they spent a year constructing the city's towering walls, which would later face the might of Greece's armies during the Trojan War. Athena's wisdom and patronage of Athens. Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, was the daughter of Zeus and Metis. Admired for her strategic mind and her patronage of clever heroes, Athena aided many on their great journeys. However, she was also a proud goddess and sought to stake her claim on the world by competing for the patronage of a great city in eastern Greece, which had yet to be named. Athena and her uncle Poseidon each presented the city with a gift, hoping to win its favor. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, causing a stream of water to rise. However, the water was salty and unusable, leaving the city's inhabitants unimpressed. In contrast, Athena, seeking to offer something truly unique, touched the earth with her hand, and the first olive tree emerged. This tree provided food, oil, and countless other benefits, profoundly impacting the ancient world. With Poseidon humbled, the gods declared Athena the victor, and the city was named Athens in her honor. It would become the capital of Greece, and one of its most significant cities. Arachne's hubris and transformation. Athena, also known for her love of the arts, was the inventor of mathematics and had a deep appreciation for music, creating the trumpet and flute. She was the patron of artists and craftsmen, and took particular pride in her weaving skills. However, this led to a conflict with a young girl named Arachne, who boasted that she was the greatest weaver ever and challenged Athena to a competition. Both wove tapestries depicting the gods, with the most skilled weaver to be declared the winner. After hours of intense work, both tapestries were complete, but to Athena's surprise, Arachne's was superior. Enraged, Athena struck Arachne repeatedly until she collapsed. Instead of killing her, Athena transformed Arachne into the first spider, where she would use her skills to weave webs, with the creatures now known as arachnids taking her name. Aphrodite's influence and the tale of Narcissus. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was born from the severed genitals of Uranus, making her the oldest Olympian. A mischievous goddess, she often used her powers for amusement, like making Zeus sleep with mortal women just to provoke Hera's wrath. Responsible for sparking desire in both gods and mortals, Aphrodite was often accompanied by Eros, known to the Romans as Cupid, whose arrows could enchant any being. Together, they spread love across the world, striking unsuspecting mortals with intense passion. One of Eros's arrows struck many potential lovers of a beautiful young man named Narcissus. Though blessed with stunning looks, Narcissus was also cursed with vanity and arrogance, delighting in cruelly rejecting the advances of many women who sought his affection. Eventually, he encountered the nymph Echo, who had been cursed by Hera, leaving her unable to speak except to repeat the words of others. Echo, who had long been in love with Narcissus, finally approached him, but could only echo his words. Uninterested, Narcissus cruelly rejected her, breaking her heart. Devastated, Echo withered away until only her voice remained, repeating the words of others, as it still does today. However, Nemesis, the goddess of vengeance, had witnessed this and decided to act. The next time Narcissus bent down to drink from a lake, he saw someone he believed he could finally love. Not a woman, but his own reflection. Mesmerized, he stared at his reflection for weeks, unable to look away. Eventually, he realized that he could never be with anyone as beautiful as himself, so he took a dagger and ended his life. From the spot where his blood touched the earth, the first narcissus flower bloomed, with the term narcissist originating from his tail. The artist Pygmalion and the statue of his dreams. While some, like Narcissus, became lost in the depths of love, others searched endlessly for it. One such man was Pygmalion, a renowned artist from the island of Cyprus. After years of failed relationships, Pygmalion gave up on women altogether, dedicating himself entirely to his art. He began work on a new statue, pouring his heart and soul into the creation. Day after day, he labored tirelessly until the figure of a woman gradually took shape. As the statue neared completion, Pygmalion was overwhelmed by its beauty. He had never seen a more perfect creation, not even among real women. But as he spent hours holding the statue's cold hands and kissing its lifeless lips, Pygmalion grew increasingly despondent, realizing that he could never love a real woman more than the one he had carved from stone. Night after night, Pygmalion prayed to the gods, hoping for a woman as perfect as his statue. Meanwhile, the stone figure began to change. Its cold, lifeless hair turned into long, flowing locks, and its gray, cracked skin became warm and supple. Astonished, Pygmalion saw a living face smile back at him. The once lifeless statue had come to life as Galatea. Aphrodite, always eager to help those in love, had answered his prayers. Galatea stepped down from her pedestal and embraced Pygmalion, ending his years of solitude. Aphrodite's jealousy and Eros's defiance. While Aphrodite enjoyed aiding lovers, she was also vain and jealous. When Psyche, a mortal princess, became so beautiful that she was said to surpass Aphrodite, the goddess was furious. Men abandoned Aphrodite's temples and altars to admire Psyche. Enraged, Aphrodite ordered Eros to make Psyche fall in love with the most despicable man. However, when Eros saw Psyche, he fell in love with her himself and defied Aphrodite's command. Psyche's trials and transformation. Since Eros refused to make anyone fall in love with Psyche, she grew increasingly despondent and sought help from the Oracle of Delphi. Following the oracle's advice, Psyche traveled to a grand palace where she was told her husband would claim her. The palace's servants warned her that her husband was secretive and would visit only at night, forbidding her from discovering his identity or seeing his face. Psyche enjoyed the palace gardens, but, driven by curiosity, lit an oil lamp one morning. To her joy, she saw that her husband was Eros. However, she accidentally spilled hot oil on him, waking him up. Hurt and disappointed by her breach of trust, Eros ended their marriage and returned to Olympus. The redemption of Psyche and the wedding of the gods. Heartbroken, Psyche begged Aphrodite for another chance. Aphrodite, still bitter, set Psyche an impossible task. Travel to the underworld and ask Persephone, queen of the dead, for a fragment of her beauty in a golden box. Psyche journeyed to the underworld, paid Charon, and crossed the river Styx. Persephone, sympathetic, agreed and placed a fragment of her beauty in the box. On her return, Psyche's curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the box, falling into a deep, dark sleep. Moved by Psyche's determination, Eros descended to earth, used his arrow to awaken her, and then returned to Olympus with her. Zeus arranged a grand wedding and granted Psyche immortality. Thus, Psyche, whose name means soul, became a goddess, and her union with Eros linked love and soul forever. Their daughter, Hedone, the goddess of pleasure, brought joy to mortals everywhere. Hephaestus, Ares, and the gods of Olympus. Hephaestus, the god of smithing and son of Zeus and Hera, faced a difficult start. Born lame, Hera, repulsed by his deformity, threw him off Olympus into the sea. He survived and later returned to Olympus, seeking revenge by crafting a golden throne that trapped Hera when she sat upon it. Zeus intervened to free Hera, securing her release by offering Hephaestus Aphrodite as his wife. As time wore on, and Tithonus wasted away until he was little more than bones, Eos transformed him into the first cicada, an insect known for its long life and its song that echoes in the early hours of dawn when Eos carries out her duties in the sky. Hermes, the mischievous messenger god. Hermes, the messenger god and patron of thieves, was known among the gods as a mischievous trickster, often playing pranks on his fellow deities. Upon reaching adulthood, he took on the role of the divine messenger, carrying a golden rod as a symbol of his authority. With the aid of his winged helmet and sandals, Hermes would fly between Olympus and the underworld, delivering messages and assisting Hades by guiding the souls of the dead to the afterlife. Like many gods, Hermes fathered numerous children with various women, but one of his sons, Pan, the god of nature and fertility, was born with the features of a satyr, part man, part goat. Pan's mother, a nymph named Dryope, was horrified when she saw her newborn with horns, a full beard, and hooves, and she fled in terror. However, Hermes embraced his son and brought him to Mount Olympus, where the gods, intrigued by Pan's unusual appearance and charmed by his playful nature, quickly grew fond of him. Among them, Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, loved Pan the most and gave him the name Pan, meaning all, as he was adored by all the gods of Olympus. Like his father, Pan was known for his many romantic pursuits, especially of nymphs, the nature deities of streams and forests. One nymph, Syrinx, became the object of Pan's affections, and he pursued her through the marshes where she lived. Desperate to escape, Syrinx transformed herself into a bed of water reeds as she reached the river's edge. When Pan finally arrived at the river, he searched the marsh frantically for the frightened nymph. As he did, a strong breeze moved through the reeds, creating a beautiful melody he had never heard before. Inspired by the sound, Pan pulled up the reeds and tied them together with wax to make a set of pipes. He played a tune on these pipes in memory of his lost love, Syrinx. These pipes, known as Pan pipes, became his constant companion. Dionysus, the god of wine, and his unfortunate gift to King Midas. Dionysus, the god of wine and parties, had a strange birth. His mother, Semele, asked Zeus to show himself in his true form, which was too overwhelming and caused her to die. To save the unborn Dionysus, Zeus placed him into his own thigh until he was fully developed, and Dionysus was born a few months later. Dionysus became one of Greece's most beloved gods, symbolizing pleasure and indulgence. His followers drank heavily, danced wildly, and loved passionately. Dionysus created wine to bring joy and ease pain. He was also generous and granted wishes. King Midas, after saving a friend of Dionysus, was granted a wish. Midas asked for everything he touched to turn to gold. At first, Midas was thrilled, turning everything in his palace to gold. But when he tried to drink water or eat, everything turned to gold too, even his food. Desperate, Midas's daughter tried to comfort him, but turned into a statue of gold. Distraught, Midas begged Dionysus to take back his gift. Dionysus told Midas to wash in the river Pactolus to remove his golden touch. Midas returned to normal, and his story warned against valuing wealth above all else. Demeter's search and the cycle of seasons. Demeter, Zeus's sister and one of the 12 Olympian gods, was the goddess of farming. She made sure the crops grew well and the land stayed fertile. Her greatest treasure was her daughter, Persephone. However, Hades also wanted Persephone. One day, while Persephone was picking a beautiful flower, the ground opened and swallowed her. Hades took her to the underworld to be his wife. Demeter was heartbroken and searched for Persephone for 9 days and nights. When the sun god Helios told her who had taken her daughter, Demeter refused to return until Persephone was released. Without Demeter's care, crops withered and famine spread across the land. Zeus intervened and sent Hermes to the underworld to negotiate Persephone's release. Hades agreed, but before Persephone left, he tricked her into eating pomegranate seeds, binding her to the underworld. Because Persephone had eaten the food of the dead, she was destined to spend part of the year with Hades in the underworld, and the rest with her mother on earth. Demeter's grief during Persephone's absence caused the winter months, and her joy upon Persephone's return brought the spring and summer. Thus, the cycle of the seasons was created to mirror the time Persephone spent in the underworld and on earth, influencing the growth and harvest of crops. The family of gods and the lessons of the myth. The gods of Olympus, each with their unique roles and personalities, influenced the world and its people in various ways.
Their stories, full of passion, mischief, and intrigue, were more than just entertainment. They served as moral lessons, reflecting the values and beliefs of ancient Greek culture. These myths, with their complex characters and divine interactions, offered explanations for natural phenomena and human behavior, showing the intricate relationships between the gods and mortals. Through their adventures and misadventures, the gods taught lessons about love, trust, loyalty, and the consequences of human actions, providing timeless insights into the nature of the divine and the human condition. Morpheus had such strong control over the unconscious mind that the drug morphine, known for making people sleep, was named after him. However, true power wasn't found in the world of dreams, but in the underworld, which was ruled by Hades. He lived in a grand palace deep underground, hidden on a fiery island. Those who tried to find it without an invitation would get lost in the dark and confusing halls of the dead. Although the underworld was full of punishments, Hades and Persephone were not cruel. They sometimes showed mercy to mortals who ended up there. Orpheus and Eurydice, a tragic love story. Orpheus, a famous musician and poet, loved a beautiful woman named Eurydice. Sadly, on their wedding day, Eurydice was bitten by a snake and died, leaving Orpheus heartbroken. Desperate to see her again, he decided to journey to the underworld to bring her back. When he reached the river Styx, he played a beautiful song on his lyre for Charon, who was so moved that he let Orpheus cross the river for free. On the other side, Orpheus met Cerberus, the three-headed dog, but his music was so sweet that it put the creature to sleep. Finally, Orpheus reached the palace of Hades and Persephone and played them a song about his lost love. Hades, moved by his sadness, agreed to let Eurydice go, but only if Orpheus didn't look at her until they were both out of the underworld. Overjoyed, Orpheus led Eurydice through the dark halls, but just as he was about to reach the surface, he turned to look at her. Since they hadn't fully left the underworld yet, Eurydice was pulled back into the realm of death forever. This story taught the Greeks about the importance of patience and self-control, as Orpheus could have had Eurydice back if he had resisted the urge to look at her.
The heroic age. The adventures of Cadmus. With the gods having established control over the world and the underworld, the heroic age began. Warriors from all over embarked on legendary adventures. The first of these heroes was Cadmus. He searched tirelessly for his sister Europa, who had been taken by Zeus, but she was nowhere to be found. Seeking answers, Cadmus visited the Oracle of Delphi, who told him to stop searching for his sister because she was lost forever. Instead, she told him that the gods had special plans for him. He was to follow a sacred cow and build a city where it lay down to rest. Cadmus found the cow and followed it for days until it rested in Boeotia. There, he founded the city of Thebes, which became one of the greatest cities in ancient Greece, rivaling Athens and Sparta in power. To bless the city, Cadmus wanted to sacrifice the cow to the goddess Athena, but he needed water from a nearby spring. When he sent his men to fetch the water, they found the spring guarded by a fierce dragon, which killed them as they tried to escape. When Cadmus heard the screams, he quickly ran to the spring and found the dragon eating his friends. He grabbed a spear and thrust it into the dragon, which let out a terrible cry as it died. Cadmus didn't realize that this dragon was sacred to Ares, the god of war, and by killing it, he had offended the god. Instead of taking Cadmus's life, Ares made him serve as a slave for 8 years before he could be forgiven. Meanwhile, Ares faced more issues on Mount Olympus. Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths, discovered that his wife, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, had been unfaithful to him. She had been in a long-term affair with Ares, and together they had a daughter named Harmonia. After Cadmus completed his years of service, Ares, impressed by his loyalty, offered Harmonia to him as a bride. They held a grand wedding in Thebes, attended by all the gods except for Hephaestus. Furious after learning about the affair, Hephaestus gave Harmonia a cursed necklace as a wedding gift, which would bring misfortune to anyone who owned it. Unaware of the curse, Cadmus and Harmonia ruled Thebes for many years and had 5 children together, 4 daughters and a son. However, the curse soon began to affect their family. Their youngest daughter, Semele, was the first to face tragedy. After spending a night with Zeus, she became pregnant with the god Dionysus.
But when she saw Zeus's true form, she burst into flames. Another sister, Ino, also met a tragic fate when her husband, Athamas, went mad and killed their children, forcing Ino to jump to her death. The third daughter, Agave, gave birth to a son named Pentheus, who became the king of Thebes after Cadmus retired. Pentheus made the fatal mistake of banning the worship of Dionysus, who then drove the women of Thebes into a frenzy, causing them to tear Pentheus apart, with Agave, under Dionysus's spell, unknowingly killing her own son. Ateneo, the last daughter, had a son named Ictian, who was turned into a deer and devoured by his own hunting dogs after he accidentally saw the goddess Artemis bathing. The curse of Harmonia's necklace continued to bring misfortune to Cadmus's descendants for generations. The curse also tormented Oedipus, the seventh king of Thebes, whose tragic story became widely known. Oedipus was the son of King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes. Laius, having received a prophecy that his son would kill him, tried to have Oedipus killed by hanging him from a tree as a baby. However, a shepherd found the child and took him to safety, naming him Oedipus because of his swollen feet. The shepherd then gave Oedipus to the king and queen of Corinth, who raised him as their own. As Oedipus grew up, he began to question who his real parents were and visited the oracle of Delphi for answers. The oracle warned him that he would kill his father and marry his mother, so Oedipus decided never to return to Corinth, thinking his adoptive parents were his birth parents. He set out for Thebes, not knowing it was his true birthplace. On the way, he encountered a chariot blocking the road. The man in the chariot, impatient, struck Oedipus on the head, causing him to kill everyone in the chariot, including the old man who hit him. Unbeknownst to Oedipus, this old man was his real father, King Laius, and he had unknowingly begun to fulfill the prophecy. When Oedipus reached Thebes, he found the city plagued by a monster called the Sphinx, sent by Hera to punish the city. The Sphinx had the head of a woman, the body of a lion, and the wings of a bird, and it would ask anyone trying to enter or leave the city a riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? Those who couldn't solve the riddle were killed and eaten by the Sphinx.
Thebes in crisis. The city of Thebes was in dire straits. A fearsome creature, known as the Sphinx, terrorized the people. In desperation, the rulers made a bold promise. Whoever could defeat the monster would be given the throne of Thebes. Many tried and failed, but then came Oedipus, a determined young man with a mind sharp enough to take on the challenge. As he approached the Sphinx, she posed her riddle, eagerly expecting another victim. But Oedipus, after careful thought, provided the answer: man. He explained that a person crawls on all 4s as a baby in the morning of life, walks on 2 legs in the prime of life, and in old age uses a cane, like a 3rd leg, for support. The Sphinx was stunned. Defeated by the young man's wisdom, she leaped from a high rock to her death. Oedipus entered Thebes as a hero. He was crowned king for freeing the city, and, as a reward, was given the hand of Queen Jocasta, the widow of the previous king. Little did Oedipus know, he had just married his own mother, fulfilling a dark and ancient prophecy. For a while, Oedipus and Jocasta lived in happiness, but their joy was not destined to last. The gods, angered by the sins committed unknowingly, patricide and incest, cast a devastating plague upon Thebes. The fall of Oedipus. As the plague grew worse, the truth about Oedipus's birth came to light. The shepherd who had saved him as a baby revealed Oedipus's true identity. Horrified by the revelation, Queen Jocasta took her own life, hanging herself in despair. When Oedipus discovered her lifeless body, he was overcome with grief. He took the golden brooches from her dress and blinded himself, unable to bear the sight of the world any longer. The people of Thebes, now aware of the truth, exiled Oedipus. Only his loyal daughter, Antigone, stayed by his side. Blind and destitute, Oedipus wandered the land, enduring the scorn of those he met. His only solace was the presence of Antigone, who cared for him until his dying day. In the end, Oedipus realized that no one, no matter how great, can escape their fate. His tragic story resonated through the ages, even inspiring Sigmund Freud's theory of the Oedipus complex, which suggests that every boy harbors unconscious desires for his mother and resents his father. The birth of Perseus. But as the tale of Oedipus drew to a close, another story was just beginning.
In the kingdom of Argos, between the great cities of Athens and Sparta, King Acrisius was troubled by a prophecy. The oracle of Delphi had warned him that his grandson would one day kill him. Acrisius, determined to avoid his fate, locked his daughter Danae in a tower, but the king's efforts were in vain. The mighty Zeus, captivated by Danae's beauty, visited her in the form of a golden shower. Soon after, Danae gave birth to a son, whom she named Perseus. Terrified that the prophecy would come true, Acrisius could not bring himself to kill his daughter and grandson. Instead, he locked them in a chest and cast it out to sea. Perseus's journey, after days and nights adrift, the chest washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where a kind fisherman named Dictys discovered it. Dictys took in Danae and her son, raising Perseus as his own. Perseus grew into a strong young man, but trouble loomed on the horizon. Dictys' brother, King Polydex, had his eye on Danae and wanted her as his wife. But Perseus, ever protective of his mother, stood in the way. Polydex devised a plan to get rid of Perseus. He announced a great feast and asked each guest to bring a horse as a gift. Perseus, having no wealth, boasted that he could bring the king something even greater, the head of Medusa, the most feared of the Gorgons. Polydex, seizing the opportunity, ordered Perseus to fulfill his boast. Despite his bravado, Perseus was deeply troubled. He had heard terrifying stories about Medusa, whose gaze could turn men to stone. But Perseus would not face this challenge alone. The gods Athena and Hermes came to his aid. Hermes gifted him an unbreakable sword, while Athena provided a polished shield that would reflect Medusa's image, allowing Perseus to see her without meeting her deadly gaze. Knowing he needed more help, Perseus sought out the nymphs who guarded the garden of the Hesperides. The nymphs gave him winged sandals for flight, Hades' helmet of invisibility, and an enchanted bag to safely carry Medusa's head. Armed with these gifts, Perseus flew to North Africa, where Medusa's lair was hidden. Creeping into the cave, Perseus found Medusa asleep among the stone statues of her victims. Using the reflection in his shield, he carefully avoided her gaze and, with one swift stroke, beheaded her. As he placed her head in the enchanted bag, a winged horse, Pegasus, sprang from her body, a child of Poseidon, born from Medusa's blood. The legacy of Perseus. But the legacy of Perseus did not end with him. One of his descendants would become the greatest hero of them all, the son of Zeus and Alcmene, Hercules, known to the Romans as Hercules. Hercules' legendary 12 labors would echo throughout every corner of the world. Yet, despite his future fame and glory, the beginnings of Hercules were marked by tragedy and sorrow. The birth of Hercules. As Zeus sat on his throne atop Mount Olympus, he gazed down upon the earth and was captivated by the beauty of Alcmene, the granddaughter of Perseus. Descending from the heavens, Zeus lay with Alcmene, and she soon became pregnant with a son. This child was named Heracles, whom Zeus intended to make the next great king of Greece. However, Zeus's wife, Hera, the queen of the gods, had been watching these events unfold. Hera's revenge. In the past, Hera had tolerated Zeus's many infidelities, but this time, she was determined to exact her revenge. When Zeus swore an oath to grant kingship to the next descendant of Perseus, believing it would be his son Heracles, Hera saw her opportunity. As Heracles was about to be born, Hera used her magic to delay his birth, while hastening the birth of another descendant of Perseus, a child named Eurystheus. Because Eurystheus was born just seconds before Heracles, he was granted the kingship, leaving Zeus powerless to intervene. The infancy of Heracles. Although Zeus could not change Heracles' fate, he found a way to retaliate against Hera. After Heracles was born, Zeus took the infant to Hera's bedchamber on Mount Olympus. While she slept, Zeus placed the baby on Hera's breast, allowing Heracles to feed on the goddess's milk and steal some of her divine power. Startled awake, Hera flung the infant from her, and her milk sprayed across the heavens, forming what we now call the Milky Way. Zeus, amused by his own cunning, returned Heracles to Earth, laying him in a crib beside his mother. Hera's wrath. But Hera was far from amused. Enraged by the humiliation, she resolved to make Heracles' life as difficult as possible. In a bid to kill the infant, she sent 2 serpents into his crib. To her surprise, the baby simply laughed, grabbing a snake in each hand and strangling them with his newfound strength. Hera watched in fury, realizing that her efforts had only made the child stronger. As Heracles grew, he was educated by some of the finest masters in Greece, learning everything from archery to music. However, one thing became clear early on: Heracles had a quick temper. Coupled with his immense strength, this made him dangerous, both to his enemies and his friends. His music teacher, Linus, learned this lesson tragically. Frustrated by his own lack of musical talent and Linus's constant corrections, Heracles snapped, striking Linus with a lyre and killing him instantly. Though he received only a minor punishment, Heracles' temper would lead to many more troubles in his later life. The tragic deception: as a young man, Heracles married the Theban princess Megara, and together they had 3 children. But his happiness would not last. Hera, still bitter over Zeus's infidelity, was determined to ruin Heracles' life. Heracles, unaware of Hera's scheming, returned home one day to find his house in disarray and his family missing. As he frantically searched for them, hideous monsters emerged from the shadows, advancing towards him. Overcome with a sudden, uncontrollable rage, Heracles attacked the creatures, killing one with a single blow. The others fled in terror, but Heracles, blinded by fury, pursued them relentlessly, destroying them all with his bare hands. It was only after the carnage that Hera lifted her spell, revealing the horrifying truth. The monsters were gone, and in their place lay the bodies of his wife and children. Heracles' atonement. Heracles stared in disbelief, the full weight of what he had done crashing down upon him. He had been deceived by Hera's magic into murdering his own family. Desperate and grief-stricken, he tried to revive them, but it was too late. The realization of his actions left Heracles with a deep, unshakable guilt, one that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Heracles, stained with the blood of a family member, knew he must atone or be hunted by the Furies. Seeking guidance, he exiled himself to consult the Oracle of Delphi. Influenced by Hera, the Oracle commanded Heracles to serve King Eurystheus of Mycenae for 10 years. The jealous Eurystheus, a weak and cowardly man, ordered Heracles to complete 10 labors without assistance or payment. The first labors of Heracles. Heracles' first task was to slay the Nemean lion, whose golden hide was impervious to weapons. After months of training, Heracles faced the lion and, using his immense strength, strangled it to death. He then skinned the beast and wore its pelt as armor.
Despite Hera's interference, Heracles, with the help of his nephew Iolaus, defeated the beast by cauterizing its necks to prevent regrowth. However, Eurystheus refused to count this labor, citing Iolaus's assistance. Heracles' third task was to capture the Ceryneian hind, a creature with bronze hooves and golden antlers. He chased it for a year before finally capturing it. Furious, Eurystheus immediately assigned him a fourth labor, to capture the Erymanthian boar. During this task, Heracles visited his friend Pholus, a centaur, but a conflict arose when Heracles drank sacred wine. The centaurs attacked, and in the ensuing chaos, Heracles accidentally killed his old teacher, Chiron. Grieving, he completed the task and returned the boar to Mycenae, where Eurystheus hid in fear. For his fifth labor, Heracles was ordered to clean the Augean stables in a single day. Using his ingenuity, he redirected 2 rivers to wash out the stables, completing the task swiftly. Despite his success, Eurystheus again refused to count the labor, claiming Heracles had been paid. Next, Heracles drove away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with iron beaks, by using bronze rattles gifted by Athena. Eurystheus, running out of ideas, sent Heracles to Crete for his 7th labor, where he captured the Cretan bull, a gift from Poseidon that had gone mad. Heracles subdued the beast and returned it to Mycenae. For his 8th labor, Heracles was tasked with retrieving the mares of Diomedes, fearsome horses that ate human flesh. After Diomedes' mares killed Heracles' companion Abderus, Heracles fed Diomedes to his own horses and brought them back to Mycenae. For his 9th labor, Heracles was sent to retrieve the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Initially, Hippolyta offered the girdle willingly, but Hera, disguised as an Amazon, incited the women against Heracles. In the ensuing battle, Heracles mistakenly killed Hippolyta and barely escaped with a few of his men, returning the girdle to Eurystheus. Eurystheus, growing increasingly frustrated with Heracles' success in every task, decided to send him as far away as possible, to the distant island of Erythea. For his 10th labor, Heracles was ordered to steal the cattle of Geryon, a fearsome giant with 3 heads. As Heracles journeyed southwest along the African coastline, he found himself unaccustomed to the continent's scorching heat. When Heracles found Prometheus, the Titan had been chained to a mountain for centuries, enduring a relentless cycle of punishment. Taking pity on him, Heracles broke Prometheus's chains, freeing him at last. In gratitude, Prometheus revealed the garden's location, but warned Heracles that no mortal could pick the apples. He advised Heracles to seek help from the Titan Atlas, who lived near the garden. Following this advice, Heracles found Atlas, who had been condemned to hold up the sky as punishment for his role in the war between the gods and Titans. Heracles proposed a trade. He would temporarily bear the weight of the sky, giving Atlas a much-needed break, in exchange for Atlas retrieving the apples. Atlas eagerly accepted, transferring the immense burden onto Heracles' shoulders. Even for someone as strong as Heracles, holding up the sky was a tremendous challenge. His muscles cramped, and his body shook under the strain. After what felt like an eternity, Atlas returned with a basket of golden apples. But instead of resuming his burden, Atlas offered to deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself. Realizing Atlas's intentions, Heracles cleverly asked the Titan to take the sky back for just a moment, while he adjusted his pelt for comfort. Unaware of the trick, Atlas agreed, taking the sky from Heracles. Once free, Heracles quickly grabbed the apples and bid Atlas farewell, returning them to Eurystheus. Furious, Atlas roared in anger, his voice shaking the ground for miles. Over time, Atlas was transformed into stone, becoming the mountain range that now bears his name in North Africa. For his final labor, Heracles was tasked with capturing Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guarded the gates of the underworld. Heracles descended to the underworld and approached Hades and Persephone, explaining his mission. Knowing that aiding Heracles would anger Hera, who had always despised him, Hades agreed to let him take Cerberus, but only under 2 conditions. Heracles could not use any weapons to capture the beast, and Cerberus had to be returned once the task was complete. Heracles agreed and set out to confront the fearsome dog. Engaging Cerberus in a brutal wrestling match, Heracles fought tirelessly until the beast was exhausted. With his club in one hand and Cerberus in the other, he dragged the creature by its chains back to the realm of the living. Heracles presented Cerberus to King Eurystheus, who, terrified, hid in his jar, a permanent fixture by his throne. Trembling, the king peeked out and, finally conceding, released Heracles from his servitude, granting him pardon for his past crimes. Overjoyed, Heracles returned Cerberus to the underworld as promised, fulfilling his final labor. Heracles' later life and tragic end. Now a free man and renowned hero, Heracles relished his newfound freedom. He embarked on several more adventures, even joining Jason and the Argonauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece. Heracles eventually married again, taking the beautiful Deianira as his wife. The couple lived happily for a time, but as they journeyed home to Tiryns, they encountered a treacherous river. A centaur named Nessus offered to carry Deianira across, But Heracles did not recognize Nessus as the sole survivor of the massacre he had committed against the Centaur tribe years earlier. Nessus, who had harbored a grudge, saw this as the perfect opportunity for revenge. Once across the river, Nessus attempted to assault Deianira. From the opposite bank, Heracles shot the centaur through the chest with a poisoned arrow. As Nessus lay dying, he cunningly offered Deianira a gift: his blood, which he claimed had magical properties to ensure Heracles' love. Deianira, unaware of the centaur's deceit, collected the blood in a vial, believing it would help her if Heracles ever loved another woman. This act would eventually lead to Heracles' tragic demise. Years passed, and Heracles grew restless, longing for the adventures of his youth. He left his family and traveled to the kingdom of Oechalia, where he fell in love with Io, the daughter of King Eurytus, his former archery tutor. Heracles brought Io back to Tiryns, where Deianira grew suspicious of her husband's fidelity. Desperate to win him back, she retrieved the vial of Nessus's blood and smeared it on a robe, which she gave to Heracles as a gift. That evening, as Heracles donned the robe, he immediately felt an excruciating pain. The blood, laced with the poison from Heracles' arrow, began to burn his flesh, sticking to his skin. In agony, Heracles tried to tear off the robe, but only succeeded in ripping away chunks of his own flesh. Nessus, the centaur, had planned everything from the start. He knew Heracles would shoot him with a poisoned arrow when he attacked Deianira. By convincing Deianira to collect his blood, which was mixed with hydra poison, Nessus ensured that Heracles would suffer the same painful death that he had inflicted on the other centaurs. Heracles' suffering lasted for hours, and when Deianira realized she had poisoned her husband, she took her own life. Knowing that his end was near, Heracles ran around his courtyard, pulling up trees to build a funeral pyre. Once it was ready, he lay down on it and asked a friend to set it on fire. As the flames burned through his skin, Heracles smiled, finally free from the pain. At that moment, a storm cloud gathered around the pyre. Inside the cloud was Zeus, who watched as the mortal part of his son burned away. Zeus then took Heracles' spirit up to Olympus and made him immortal. From that point on, Heracles was worshipped as a god by the Greeks. His labors became legendary, and Zeus eventually placed his son in the stars as a constellation. While some heroes like Heracles earned their place among the gods, others became arrogant. Many mortal men who thought they were equal to the gods often met tragic ends. One such man was Bellerophon, the grandson of Sisyphus, who was cursed to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. Bellerophon was given the winged horse Pegasus by Poseidon and learned to ride it with help from Athena. He went on many adventures, the most famous being his defeat of the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and a snake for a tail. But as Bellerophon's fame grew, so did his ego. Believing he deserved a place among the gods, he flew Pegasus toward Mount Olympus. This angered Zeus, who believed Bellerophon thought himself equal to the Olympians, and was using a gift from the gods to get there. As Bellerophon neared the heavens, Zeus sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, causing the horse to throw Bellerophon off its back. Although he survived the fall, Bellerophon was blinded when he landed in a thorn bush. He spent the rest of his life wandering alone, serving as a warning to those who dared compare themselves to the gods. Pegasus, meanwhile, completed the journey to Olympus, where he was claimed by Zeus and carried the gods' thunder and lightning for the rest of time. The end of the first age of heroes. With the adventures of Cadmus, Perseus, and Heracles over, the first age of heroes was coming to an end. But a new generation of heroes, inspired by their stories, was ready to create their own legends. One of these legends was Jason and the Argonauts' quest for the Golden Fleece. Jason, the heir to the city of Iolcus, was banished from his homeland as a child by his uncle Peleus, a ruthless tyrant who seized the throne. Jason was raised by Chiron, the teacher of Hercules and other famous heroes. After 20 years of training in athletics, speechcraft, and warfare, Jason set out to reclaim his kingdom. The prophecy and Jason's return. On his journey back to Iolcus, Jason came across a river with a strong current. An old woman on his side of the stream couldn't cross, so Jason offered to carry her on his back. But as he did, the current swept away one of his sandals, and he continued his journey with 1 foot bare. Meanwhile, back in Iolcus, King Peleus had just asked an oracle how he would die. The oracle warned him to beware of a man with 1 sandal. When Jason arrived at the palace, wearing only 1 sandal, and the townspeople cheered his return, Peleus knew he couldn't kill him outright. Instead, he challenged Jason to retrieve the golden fleece from Colchis, promising to give up the kingdom if Jason succeeded. Peleus was certain Jason would die along the way. With his honor on the line, Jason accepted the challenge, but knew he needed the greatest heroes for the dangerous journey ahead. Word spread, and soon heroes from all over the land flocked to join Jason. The first to arrive was Hercules, who offered his strength and skill. He was followed by Zeus and Calais, the winged sons of the north wind, and the twin brothers Castor and Pollux, known as the Dioscuri. Other heroes joined, including Peleus, the father of Achilles, his brother Telamon, who fought the Amazons with Heracles, and the heroes of the Caledonian boar hunt, Euphemus, Meleager, and Idas. The last to join was Orpheus, the famous poet known for his beautiful singing. To transport these heroes, Jason enlisted the help of Argus, a legendary shipbuilder. With Athena's help, Argus built the Argo, the fastest and strongest ship of its time. Athena placed an enchanted piece of wood at the bow, allowing Jason to communicate with the gods. As they set sail, Jason and his companions named themselves the Argonauts, after the ship. Their first stop was the island of Lemnos, inhabited entirely by women. Years earlier, the women had been cursed by Aphrodite for neglecting her temple, causing their husbands to prefer their female slaves. Feeling betrayed, the women killed every male on the island and had lived alone ever since. When the Argonauts arrived, Aphrodite lifted the curse, allowing the women to greet their visitors. With the curse gone, Aphrodite hoped the women would become pregnant, ensuring the island's survival and a new generation of worshippers. Her plan worked, and after a year, the Argonauts had not left the island. Heracles, angry that they had forgotten their quest, shamed them into continuing their journey. The Argonauts left Lemnos and soon arrived at Chios, where Heracles needed to replace his broken oar. However, Heracles' servant Hylas wandered into the forest and became lost. Hylas found a beautiful spring and stopped to drink and bathe. The spring was home to water nymphs, who, upon seeing Hylas, fell in love with him. They grabbed him and pulled him into the water, making him immortal and trapping him there forever. Heracles searched the forest but could not find Hylas, who remained hidden by the nymphs. After days of relentless searching, Heracles finally returned to the shore, only to find that Jason and the Argonauts had departed without him. Their next journey took them past the kingdom of Thrace and through the treacherous clashing rocks, a perilous waterway that no ship had ever successfully navigated before. Emerging into the Black Sea, Jason and his crew finally glimpsed Colchis, their ultimate destination, where the legendary Golden Fleece, the most prized possession in existence, was guarded by King Hades. Upon arriving at the palace, Achilles welcomed the Argonauts, but refused to relinquish the fleece, confident it was safe under the watchful eye of the fearsome Colchian dragon. Aware that defeating the dragon was an impossible feat even for Jason, Hera, queen of the gods, decided to intervene. Long ago, Jason had shown kindness to an old woman by carrying her across a river, unaware that she was Hera in disguise. Now, the goddess sought to repay him by causing Medea, the beautiful and powerful daughter of King Aeetes, to fall in love with Jason. Medea, a skilled sorceress, offered her assistance to Jason, providing him with a bundle of magical herbs to subdue the dragon. Armed with the herbs, Jason successfully put the beast to sleep and seized the golden fleece. With their prize in hand, Jason and the Argonauts hastily retreated to their ship, with Medea joining them as they made a quick escape. Medea's betrayal and escape. At dawn, King Aeetes discovered the theft of the golden fleece and swiftly assembled a fleet to pursue them, led by his son, Absyrtus. The chase was close, and Medea, realizing they couldn't outrun the fleet, devised a plan. She requested the Argo be halted to negotiate with her brother, Absyrtus. As his ship approached, Medea pulled him aboard and, in a shocking betrayal, stabbed him in the chest. She then dismembered his body, casting the pieces into the sea, forcing her grieving father to halt the pursuit to collect them. With the time she had bought, the Argonauts sought a way to escape. The journey through the Istros River and the Alps. They headed west, entering the Istros River, and sailed for weeks until they reached the Alps. At a dead end, the Argonauts carried their ship over the mountains by foot until they reached the Rhodanus River, where they set sail once more, entering the Mediterranean Sea. As they sailed, a beautiful melody filled the air, the call of the sirens, irresistible creatures whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their doom. But Orpheus, the renowned poet among them, played his lyre, his music growing louder until it drowned out the sirens' call, saving the crew from certain death. Continuing their journey back to Greece, the Argonauts next arrived at the island of Scheria, home to the hospitable Phaeacians, who welcomed them warmly. After facing numerous dangers, they rested on the island for several weeks, during which Jason and Medea celebrated their wedding with a grand feast. Now married, they resumed their voyage home. As they neared Greece, the Argonauts decided to take one final rest on the island of Crete, unaware it was guarded by Talos, a giant bronze statue that patrolled the shore 3 times daily, destroying any approaching ships. Powerless against the giant, the Argonauts fled in terror, but there was nowhere to hide. Medea, using her magic, identified Talos' one weakness: a large bronze nail in his ankle that kept his divine blood from spilling out. She tricked Talos into believing she could make him immortal, convincing him to remove the nail. As his blood poured out, Talos collapsed, never to threaten travelers again. With the giant defeated, the Argonauts boarded their ship and finally reached Iolcus. After years of perilous travel, and with the golden fleece in hand, Jason was ready to reclaim his homeland. But upon his return, Jason learned that King Peleus had murdered his father during his absence. Consumed by revenge, Jason confronted the king, demanding the kingdom be rightfully handed over. When Peleus refused, Medea, realizing the king would never surrender his throne, concocted a cunning plan. Medea invited the king's daughters to witness a demonstration. She chopped an old ram into pieces and boiled it in a cauldron. Using her magic, the ram emerged from the cauldron, restored to its youthful vigor. Envious, the daughters wanted the same for their aging father. That night, they dismembered Peleus and placed him in the cauldron, eagerly awaiting his rejuvenation. But Medea's true plan unfolded the next morning, as the daughters found only the butchered remains of their father. Medea laughed, her scheme having succeeded perfectly. With Peleus dead, Jason was poised to take the throne, but the king's son, Acastus, discovered Medea's involvement in the murder and drove Jason and Medea from the city. The couple fled south to Corinth, where Jason hung the golden fleece in the temple of Zeus and left his life of adventure behind. He and Medea started a family, but as time passed, Jason's desire for power and prestige resurfaced. He abandoned Medea and their children to marry Princess Creusa, seeking to regain his former glory. Heartbroken and betrayed, Medea vowed revenge. She sent Creusa a magical robe as a wedding gift, and the moment it touched her skin, Creusa's flesh began to burn. Her father tried to save her, but he too was consumed by the flames. They perished together before Jason's horrified eyes. Knowing who was responsible, Jason sought out Medea, but when he found her, he was met with an even greater horror. The bodies of their two sons, Alcamenes and Tysander, lay at her feet, slain by Medea's hand. In despair, Jason wept as Medea escaped in the chariot of her grandfather, the sun god Helios. Jason lived out the rest of his days in solitude, never finding love again and fathering no more children. He often visited the Argo, the ship that had once brought him fame and fortune. But one day, as he lay beneath it, the ship's decaying stern collapsed, crushing him to death. The vessel that had once been his pride was now the instrument of his demise. As for Medea, she fled to Athens, where she found refuge, and used her beauty to seduce King Aegeus. She became queen and bore him a son, but her rise to power was soon challenged when the city's rightful heir, the hero Theseus, returned to claim his birthright. Years before Medea's arrival, King Aegeus had ruled Athens alone, longing for an heir but failing to father one. Desperate, he sought guidance from the oracle at Delphi, who instructed him to travel to the kingdom of Troezen, where Princess Aethra would bear him a son. Aegeus followed the oracle's advice, and that night, Aethra conceived a child. Unbeknownst to Aegeus, Poseidon also visited Aethra that evening, and the child born to her, Theseus, was the son of both Aegeus and Poseidon. This divine lineage granted Theseus incredible strength and agility, qualities that would serve him well in the trials to come. Aegeus, knowing he must return to Athens, left Aethra to raise Theseus alone. He placed his sword and sandals under a heavy stone, instructing her that only when Theseus was strong enough to lift the stone and retrieve the items would he be ready to claim his birthright. When the day came, Theseus, now a man, lifted the stone and took his father's possessions, setting out for Athens. Upon his arrival, however, Theseus found that his father had married Medea, who had borne him a son named Metis, the heir to the throne. Fearing that Theseus would take her son's place, Medea plotted against him. She sent him to battle the bull of Marathon, a fierce creature Hercules had once brought to Greece, hoping he would perish. But Theseus, with his great strength, killed the bull with ease and returned victorious. Medea, shocked by his success, attempted one final act of treachery. She offered Theseus a cup of poisoned wine as he approached the king. But just as he was about to drink, Aegeus recognized the sword and sandals Theseus wore, the same ones he had hidden under the stone. Realizing that Theseus was his son, Aegeus knocked the cup from his hand, saving his life. Upon discovering Medea's treachery, Aegeus banished her from the city, finally acknowledging Theseus as his true heir. Medea, once again exiled, returned to her homeland of Colchis, where she reconciled with her father, Aeetes, and restored him to the throne. There, at the edge of the known world, she lived out her remaining days. Meanwhile, Theseus settled in Athens, only to learn of a grave situation facing the city. Many years prior, Athens had been defeated in a war against King Minos of Crete. To avoid further destruction, King Aegeus was forced to sign a treaty that demanded Athens send 7 boys and 7 girls to Crete every 9 years. These children were sacrificed to the Minotaur, a monstrous creature that was half man, half bull, and lived within the labyrinth beneath Minos' palace. Horrified by this cruel pact, Theseus volunteered to be among the next group of tributes, determined to kill the Minotaur and end the suffering of his people. Despite Aegeus' pleas for him to stay, Theseus set sail for Crete, promising his father that if he returned victorious, he would change his ship's black sails to white. Upon arriving in Crete, Theseus was introduced to King Minos and his family, where he caught the eye of Minos' daughter, Ariadne. Deeply smitten, Ariadne offered Theseus a ball of thread to help him navigate the labyrinth. All she asked in return was that Theseus take her back to Athens with him. Theseus agreed, and with the thread in hand he ventured into the labyrinth. The labyrinth was a place of terror, with endless, twisting passages that had claimed the lives of all who entered before. However, after hours of navigating the dark maze, Theseus finally encountered the Minotaur. In a fierce battle, Theseus used his speed and agility to overcome the beast, eventually stabbing it in the throat. With the Minotaur dead, Theseus found his way back to the entrance using Ariadne's thread, reuniting with her and the other tributes. The group quickly fled Crete, but during their journey back to Athens, Theseus began to distance himself from Ariadne, realizing he no longer needed her. When they stopped to rest on the island of Dia, Theseus abandoned Ariadne while she slept, leaving her stranded. Heartbroken, Ariadne was found by the god Dionysus, who took her to Olympus as his wife. As Theseus' ship approached Athens, he was so consumed with thoughts of glory that he forgot to change the sails to white. Seeing the black sails, King Aegeus believed his son was dead and, in his grief, threw himself from a cliff into the sea, which would thereafter be known as the Aegean Sea. Returning to Athens, Theseus mourned his father before being crowned king. He would go on to become one of Greece's greatest heroes, joining Hercules in his battle against the Amazons and aiding Oedipus in his time of need. Elsewhere in Greece, the brilliant architect Daedalus, who had designed the labyrinth for King Minos, was imprisoned by the king, along with his son Icarus, after Theseus' escape. Trapped in his own creation, Daedalus devised a plan to escape by crafting wings from feathers and wax. He warned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, but Icarus, overcome with the thrill of flight, ignored his father's warning. The wax in his wings melted, and Icarus fell into the sea, becoming a cautionary tale for generations to come. In the city of Calydon, King Oeneus and Queen Althea faced their own trials. Their son Meleager, secretly fathered by the god Ares, was destined to live as long as a certain log remained unburned. His mother, having overheard this prophecy, hid the log to protect her son. Years later, when a monstrous boar sent by Artemis began ravaging Calydon, Meleager, now a celebrated hero, led a group of warriors to slay the beast. Among them was Atalanta, a skilled huntress and follower of Artemis. Though mocked at first, Atalanta proved her worth by wounding the boar, allowing Meleager to deliver the final blow. In gratitude, Meleager offered her the boar's hide, but this enraged his uncles, who felt the prize should go to them. Enraged, Meleager killed them both. Queen Althea, upon learning of her brothers' deaths, was overcome with grief and anger. In a moment of despair, she burned the log that held her son's life. Meleager died in agony, and Althea, realizing the magnitude of her actions, took her own life. Despite the tragic end to the Caledonian boar hunt, Atalanta's reputation grew, attracting suitors from all over Greece. She vowed to marry only the man who could beat her in a foot race. Many tried and failed, until Hippomenes, aided by Aphrodite, used 3 golden apples to distract Atalanta during the race, allowing him to win. They married, but after neglecting to honor Aphrodite, the goddess cursed them, turning them into lions. In ancient Greek belief, male and female lions were thought to be incapable of mating. Instead, they believed lion cubs were born from the union of lions and leopards. This meant that the couple, transformed into lions, were cursed to roam the earth together, eternally close yet forever deprived of the joys of intimacy. With the conclusion of the Caledonian boar hunt, a new generation of heroes was poised to emerge. However, Zeus, the king of the gods, felt that too many demigods still walked the earth. He believed there should be a clearer separation between gods and mortals. To achieve this, Zeus set in motion a series of events that would culminate in a war unlike any the world had ever seen, that would finally rid the earth of his many descendants. Across the sea from the grand cities of Greece lay the mighty kingdom of Troy. Renowned for its indestructible walls, said to have been built by the gods themselves, Troy was ruled by King Priam and Queen Hecuba. Their reign was marked by the deep love and respect of their people, and they were blessed with 50 sons and 50 daughters. Among them, Prince Hector stood out as the most admired, a brave and honorable warrior, deeply devoted to his homeland and family. His greatest love was for his wife, Andromache, and their son, Astyanax, for whom Hector would do anything to protect. Hector's sister Cassandra was less fortunate. She once caught the eye of the god Apollo, who gifted her with the power of prophecy in an attempt to win her love. But when Cassandra rejected him, Apollo, enraged by jealousy, cursed her so that no one would ever believe her prophecies. Another significant figure in Troy was Paris, the brother of Hector and Cassandra. Paris was raised away from his family due to a prophecy that foretold he would bring destruction to Troy. Before his birth, Hecuba was warned of this fate, but could not bring herself to kill her unborn child. Instead, she instructed a local shepherd to carry out the task. However, the shepherd, moved by the infant's innocence, spared Paris and raised him in secret, a decision that would alter the course of history. But Paris was not the only child destined to play a crucial role in Troy's downfall. Across the seas in Sparta, Zeus had fallen in love with Queen Leda. Transforming himself into a majestic swan, Zeus lay with Leda, and soon she gave birth to 2 eggs. From these eggs hatched 2 sons, Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri, who would later join the Argonauts, as well as 2 daughters, Clytemnestra and Helen. Helen would grow up to be the most beautiful woman in the world. Zeus's grand plan had begun. When Helen came of age, suitors from far and wide flocked to Sparta, hoping to win her hand. The greatest warriors, the richest lords, and even Greece's princes made the journey, including Odysseus of Ithaca, Agamemnon of Mycenae, and Ajax of Salamis. Fearing the chaos that might follow from her decision, Helen was hesitant. To prevent bloodshed, Odysseus suggested that all suitors swear an oath to protect Helen's chosen husband. With this safeguard in place, Helen chose Prince Menelaus of Mycenae, and they soon married, becoming the king and queen of Sparta. Disappointed but bound by their oath, the other suitors returned home, unaware that this very oath would later draw them into one of the greatest wars the world had ever seen. Meanwhile, on Mount Olympus, another marriage was taking place between Thetis, the goddess of water, and Peleus, a former Argonaut and king of Phthia. Their wedding was a grand affair, attended by gods and heroes alike, except for one, Hera, the goddess of discord and strife. Angry at being excluded, Eris decided to attend anyway, bringing with her a golden apple inscribed with the words, "To the most beautiful." She tossed the apple among the goddesses, sparking a fierce rivalry between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each claiming the apple as their own. Unable to resolve the dispute, they turned to Zeus, who saw this as an opportunity to further his plans. He assigned the task of judgment to a mortal, none other than Paris, the exiled prince of Troy, known for his fairness. The goddesses approached Paris, each offering him a tempting gift in exchange for the apple. Hera promised him dominion over Europe and Asia. Athena offered unmatched skill in warfare, but Aphrodite, appealing to his desires, promised him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, unable to resist, awarded the apple to Aphrodite, who then directed him to Sparta, where Queen Helen, renowned for her beauty, resided. Following Aphrodite's guidance, Paris traveled to Sparta and met Helen. The two quickly fell in love, and Paris, with Helen by his side, fought off the Spartan guards who attempted to prevent her abduction. They escaped and set sail for Troy. Upon their arrival, Paris was recognized by his father, King Priam, who welcomed him warmly. Helen's beauty captivated everyone in the palace, and she was celebrated as the new princess of Troy. However, amidst the celebration, two members of the royal family were troubled by Helen's arrival. Prince Hector, angered by his brother's reckless actions, warned that bringing Helen to Troy would inevitably lead to war. But it was Cassandra who reacted most strongly, her cries of despair foretelling the destruction of Troy. Yet, cursed by Apollo, her warnings were dismissed as madness. When Menelaus returned to Sparta and learned of Helen's abduction, he was furious. He called upon all the former suitors of Helen to honor their oath and join him in attacking Troy. True to their word, the greatest warriors of Greece rallied to his side, including his brother Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mycenae who would lead the Greek fleet. But Nestor, Diomedes, Odysseus, and the mighty Ajax were among those who joined the cause, as well as Achilles, the greatest warrior of all time, who was invulnerable except for his heel. With the Greek forces assembled, Agamemnon prepared to set sail, but the fleet was stalled by calm seas and a lack of wind, a consequence of Agamemnon offending the goddess Artemis by killing a sacred deer. To appease the goddess and restore the winds, Agamemnon was told he must sacrifice his eldest daughter, Iphigenia. Unable to bear the delay, Agamemnon deceitfully lured Iphigenia to the camp under the guise of marriage to Achilles. Upon realizing the true purpose of her visit, Iphigenia was heartbroken as her father sacrificed her to appease Artemis. With the winds restored, the Greeks set sail, ready to face Troy. In Troy, preparations for war were underway. Aeneas, a son of Aphrodite and cousin to the royal family, joined the fight to defend his homeland. Troy also called upon its allies, including the Lycians, led by the legendary warriors Sarpedon and Glaucus, and the fierce Amazons, led by Penthesilea, a daughter of Ares. The gods themselves were divided, with Hera and Athena siding with the Greeks, and Aphrodite, along with Apollo and Ares, supporting the Trojans. For 9 long years, the Greeks besieged Troy, unable to breach its walls. As resources dwindled, Achilles led the Greeks on a campaign to plunder nearby towns and cities, seeking supplies and wealth to sustain their war effort. The stage was now set for the legendary conflict that would become known as the Trojan War, a war that would change the course of history and echo through the ages. Achilles pursued Hector, who, after a prolonged chase around Troy's walls, finally confronted him. Hector fought valiantly, but was ultimately defeated. As Hector lay dying, he requested that his body be treated with respect, allowing his family to mourn. Despite this, Achilles, consumed by rage, killed Hector and desecrated his body by dragging it behind his chariot around the city. This act of brutality deeply affected Hector's father, King Priam, who, under the cover of night, pleaded with Achilles for the return of his son's body. Moved by Priam's sorrow and reminded of his own grief for Patroclus, Achilles agreed to return Hector's body. Priam returned to Troy with Hector's corpse, and the city mourned the loss of their hero. Hector's wife, Andromache, and their son, Astyanax, were especially devastated. With Hector gone and the Greek forces closing in, the fate of Troy seemed sealed. Achilles, now a central figure in the Greek assault, faced a new challenge when Paris, guided by Apollo, shot him in his only vulnerable spot, his heel, with a poisoned arrow. As Achilles succumbed to the poison, the Greeks, witnessing his death, sought revenge on Paris. With Achilles dead, the Greeks despaired, believing that the fall of Troy was impossible without their greatest warrior. Yet, Odysseus devised a clever plan, a massive wooden horse hollowed out to conceal Greek warriors. The Trojans, finding the horse outside their walls and believing it to be a peace offering, brought it into the city. Cassandra, sensing the trap, urged the Trojans to destroy the horse, but her warnings were dismissed. That night, while the Trojans slept, Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and Ajax emerged from the horse, killed the guards, and opened the gates for the rest of the Greek army. The city awoke to chaos as Greek soldiers flooded in, setting fire to homes and slaughtering defenders. King Priam met his end at the hands of Pyrrhus, Achilles' son, who killed the old king and then proceeded to throw Hector's son, Astyanax, from the city walls. Andromache was taken into slavery. After 10 grueling years, the Greeks had finally breached Troy's famed walls. With its heroes defeated and its king dead, Troy fell to the Greeks. Cassandra, seeking refuge in the Temple of Athena, watched in horror as her fellow Trojans were slaughtered. In the aftermath of the fall of Troy, the fate of its survivors took tragic and dramatic turns. Ajax the Lesser, a Greek warrior, committed a grave offense when he found Cassandra hiding in a temple. He violated her in front of Athena's sacred statue. Angered by this sacrilege, Athena struck Ajax's ship with a bolt of lightning, causing it to capsize. Poseidon then dragged Ajax to his watery doom. For Cassandra, the ordeal was far from over. With Ajax dead, Agamemnon claimed her as his concubine. Their journey to his home in Mycenae was fraught with dread and would soon lead to a terrible fate. Among the Trojans who escaped, Aeneas stood out. Leading a small group of survivors, he fled the burning city, crossed the Mediterranean, and reached Italy. There, he and his followers began a new life, with his descendants, Romulus and Remus, eventually founding Rome. Menelaus, reunited with Helen, returned to Sparta, where they resumed their reign as king and queen. When their time came, they passed into the afterlife, residing on the Isle of the Blessed. However, not all the heroes of Troy met such peaceful ends. Agamemnon faced a grim destiny upon his return to Mycenae. Welcomed home as a hero, Agamemnon paraded the spoils of war, including Cassandra, now his unwilling captive. His wife, Clytemnestra, enraged by his infidelity and still bitter over the sacrifice of their daughter, Iphigenia, seized the moment. In a fit of jealousy, she murdered Cassandra with an axe. Her vengeance did not end there. That evening, she crept into Agamemnon's bedchamber and killed him, mirroring the brutal end he had imposed on their daughter. Clytemnestra then seized the throne of Mycenae. Agamemnon's son Orestes was determined to avenge his father. He stormed the palace and killed Clytemnestra, only to be overwhelmed by deep remorse. His act of vengeance led him to be pursued by the Furies, vengeful spirits bound to punish familial bloodshed. Driven to madness by these spirits, Orestes only found peace through Athena's intervention. Meanwhile, one hero who had yet to return was Odysseus, the cunning Greek king. His journey home from Troy after fighting for 10 long years would last another decade. Odysseus, having finally completed his mission, set sail for Ithaca, where his wife Penelope and son Telemachus awaited. However, a storm blew them off course to a distant island. On this island, they encountered the giant Cyclops Polyphemus, son of Poseidon. Polyphemus trapped Odysseus and his men in his cave and devoured some of them. To escape, Odysseus devised a clever plan. He got the Cyclops drunk, blinded him with a sharpened stake, and tricked him into thinking that nobody was attacking him. As Polyphemus called for help, his fellow Cyclopes, confused by the name, left him alone. Odysseus and his men escaped by hiding under the sheep Polyphemus led out to graze. Yet Odysseus made a fatal mistake by revealing his true identity to Polyphemus, leading the Cyclops to curse him. Poseidon, seeking revenge for his son's blinding, doomed Odysseus to wander the seas for 10 more years. Odysseus's troubles continued. After being expelled from Aeolia, where King Aeolus had previously helped him, Odysseus encountered the cannibalistic Laestrygonians, who destroyed all but one of his ships. Their next stop, the island of Aeaea, was home to the enchantress Circe. She turned Odysseus's men into pigs, but with Hermes' aid and a magic herb, Odysseus managed to confront her. Impressed by his bravery, Circe reversed her spell and became his ally, even bearing him a son, Telegonus. Before leaving, Circe advised Odysseus to visit the underworld to consult the prophet Tiresias. Tiresias warned Odysseus not to harm the cattle of the sun god Helios if he wished to return home safely. Heeding this advice, Odysseus continued his journey, but his crew's greed led to disaster. Believing the windbag given by Aeolus contained treasure, they opened it, and all the winds escaped, driving them back to Aeolia. Expelled by Aeolus, Odysseus faced more trials. On the island of Thrinacia, home to Helios's sacred cattle, he was tempted to defy the prophecy. The crew's hunger led them to slaughter the cattle, resulting in further divine retribution and more hardship for Odysseus. As Odysseus approached his final trials, he faced the twin dangers of Scylla, a six-headed sea monster, and Charybdis, a massive whirlpool. Choosing to confront Scylla, he lost 6 men to the beast, but avoided complete destruction. The journey continued, filled with peril and the constant struggle to overcome both mortal and divine challenges. Despite Odysseus's strict orders for his men to avoid the cattle, it proved challenging for them to follow. After being stranded on the island for nearly a month due to a relentless storm, and with their food supplies nearly depleted, the crew, driven by starvation, waited for Odysseus to fall asleep. They then slaughtered the cattle and feasted on the meat. When Odysseus awoke, he was overwhelmed with despair and disbelief at his crew's reckless behavior. Although the storm had finally subsided, allowing them to set sail again, their transgression did not go unnoticed. The sun god Helios, enraged by the slaughter, complained to Zeus, who responded by striking Odysseus's ship with a thunderbolt. The ship was shattered, and all but one of the crew perished. According to fate, Poseidon's curse had come to fruition, leaving Odysseus clinging to the wreckage. For 9 days and nights, he drifted at sea until, on the 10th day, he landed on the island of the goddess Calypso. Calypso, daughter of the Titan Atlas, rescued Odysseus and fell in love with him, offering him immortality if he stayed with her forever. Yet Odysseus yearned to return to his wife, Penelope, and son, Telemachus, and declined her offer. Insulted, Calypso imprisoned him on the island for 7 years. Despite being forced to share her bed, Odysseus spent his nights mourning on the shore. On Mount Olympus, Athena, who had supported Odysseus throughout the Trojan War, felt compassion for him. She pleaded with Zeus to let Odysseus return home. Zeus agreed, commanding Calypso to free him. Reluctantly, Calypso assisted Odysseus in building a raft, but Poseidon, learning of Odysseus's escape, conjured a storm that wrecked it. Barely surviving, Odysseus swam to the island of Scheria, where he collapsed on the shore, naked and exhausted. The island of Scheria was ruled by King Alcinous and Queen Arete, and their daughter Nausicaa discovered Odysseus the next day while washing clothes by the sea. Alarmed by his nakedness, her maids fled in fear, but Nausicaa, inspired by Athena, remained calm. She clothed Odysseus and took him to the palace, where he was introduced to her parents. The royal family welcomed Odysseus, and he dined with them, enjoying entertainment from Demodocus the poet, who sang of the gods and heroes. During the evening, the king requested that Odysseus share his story. Reluctant to reveal his identity due to the curse it had brought upon him, Odysseus avoided the question and spoke instead of his travels. After a grand feast, Demodocus sang of the Trojan War, including the clever Odysseus and the wooden horse. Moved by the tale of his own exploits, Odysseus wept for the friends he had lost. Noticing Odysseus's tears, the king grew curious and prompted him to reveal his name. Overwhelmed by the poet's portrayal of his story and moved by the attention, Odysseus admitted he was the famed hero of Troy. He explained that, rather than returning home after the war, he had wandered for 10 years, with each attempt to return ending in tragedy. The king and queen, impressed and honored, vowed to help him. The next morning, Odysseus found a ship prepared for his journey home, complete with a crew and riches. He set sail, grateful for their aid, and finally reached Ithaca after 20 years. Athena, knowing the dangers awaiting him, transformed Odysseus into an old beggar to ensure he entered his home unnoticed. Penelope, who had been faithful for 2 decades, was now surrounded by suitors eager to marry her. Penelope, trying to delay remarriage, had devised a scheme involving a burial garment for Odysseus's father. Each night, she unraveled her work, stalling for 3 years until her trick was discovered, leaving her no choice but to select a suitor. Unbeknownst to her, Odysseus was near. He first visited his loyal servant Eumaeus, who welcomed him warmly and pledged to help him reclaim his home. Soon after, Telemachus, Odysseus's son, returned from his quest to find his father. Upon arriving at the palace, Telemachus saw Eumaeus dining with a stranger and asked to join them. Eumaeus, aware of the beggar's true identity, left to inform Penelope of her son's return. With Eumaeus gone, Athena restored Odysseus's true form. Telemachus, amazed and emotional, embraced his father, and their reunion was bittersweet as they prepared to confront the suitors. Disguised again as a beggar, Odysseus entered the palace and discovered Penelope's contest for choosing a husband. She declared she would marry the man who could shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads using Odysseus's bow. None of the suitors succeeded, each failing to even string the bow. When Odysseus, still disguised, asked for a turn, the suitors laughed. But the laughter ceased when he effortlessly strung the bow and shot through all 12 axes. Seeing the state of his home and the disrespect shown by the suitors, Odysseus could not forgive them. He turned the bow on them, killing them one by one. The suitors, in panic, searched for their weapons, but Telemachus had hidden them. With Eumaeus joining Odysseus and Telemachus, they fought until all the suitors were dead. With the suitors defeated, Odysseus's final task was to reunite with Penelope, whose undying faith had sustained him. Recognizing her husband, Penelope embraced Odysseus, and they were finally reunited. When she asked him where he had been all this time, Odysseus simply replied, "Where do I begin?" As Odysseus's story concluded, so did the Age of Heroes. Zeus had successfully separated the realms of gods and men, ending the era of mythical beasts and demigods. The heroic tales would now become legend, preserved by poets like Homer and retold through the ages. Zeus, having failed to create ideal humans, would now usher in the Age of Iron, an era marked by struggle and perseverance. This new race of humans would face hardships, but also have the opportunity to shape their own destiny. They would build civilizations, innovate, and explore, eventually reaching the heavens and gaining a new perspective on their world. Thanks for joining the adventure. Hit subscribe and share this epic tale with friends. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Stay tuned for our next exciting audiobook. See you soon.